Dear class, welcome back to Political Economy. We are looking at comparative politics lectures focusing on political economy, right? So this is slide 2. It's gonna look at the politics of allocation and at money. So let's start. So as you know, we said earlier that political economy looks at questions of how economy impacts politics and how politics impacts economics, right? So there's an interrelationship. As you know, in today's society, we often talk about questions of access to resources, and allocation therefore becomes political, okay? So who gets access to resources of this country? This is a political question, right? We always talk about, access to higher education, to healthcare, which means that we assume that the way that markets do the allocation of resources or provide access depends on money, right? Whoever has money has access to what the market will provide. Whoever has basically low income, they are unable to access expensive things, right? So let's look at how markets allocate resources. All right. So on a greater level, we will see that economic behavior of consumers and businesses can have impact on access to resources for the economy, right? We will look at these things. So we will see how the government intervenes to regulate this impact as well, okay? So if left to their own, how do markets allocate resources? And then what does the government do to regulate the impact of markets? So we're looking at two things here. And in the end, we want to understand if we have greater equity in society due to these policies. Here, equity means equal impact. Okay, so what is the impact? So we have any kind of legislation, we want to see the impact on different groups. Okay, so here we are interested in access to resources. All right, so let's have a look. So markets, we say, are allocators of resources, okay? Now, you can have direct government allocation of resources, and we say that China is doing that. They basically do all the allocating, and then they tell the markets, this is what you're gonna deal with. However, in the US, we say markets are the primary allocators, okay? Okay, so in capitalism. So what you demand determines what is supplied in a capitalist society, okay? So markets behave like this. So you demand 1,000 apples, all right? And there's 330 million people in the US. So how many apples are being demanded on an annual basis? We can find the information on that, right? By looking at what the markets are selling. So what you demand determines what the country producers have to supply. Okay, so let's look at that. Basically, your quantity demanded drives apple production. That's what we're saying essentially, right? So your quantity demanded. So if you demand 3,000 apples, say, and other people are similar, so this is your consumption, say, in a year. So multiply that with 3 say 330 million people, okay? So say some people are too old, some people are too young, they're not able to eat apples as much, okay? But there's a fair population that's like you, okay? So anyways, in a year, you can find out what the total demand for apples is, okay? Based on that, the market is telling you this is what the demand is. The producers will try to produce this many, okay? Now, you are growing apples in your farm. Your trees don't stop producing if you hear in that the market demand has gone down, right? So they'll keep producing because this is an organic process. We have no control over apples, their production, right? In that way. Once the tree is happening, the tree is growing, it's alive, it will produce. What happens when you have an excess amount of apple production? So then you have to find new markets, right? You may have to export your apples to another country. So this is how the market by itself, without any kind of interference from the government, operates, okay? So we will look at government interference in a minute. Let's look at the way that money acts. So money, we are going to talk very fast about money. So as we mentioned, in the barter system, there was no money. But people got tired of this lugging of their goods to everybody's house to find out what the surplus was and what they were willing to sell, right? So now they come up with the idea of money. Let's give some shiny object to people that looks very pretty. Maybe they will accept it and give us their goats and food and all of that in exchange, right? So at some point, metals were used. Before that, shells were used. Milton Friedman is an economist, and he writes about money, the history of money, in his book, Money Mischief. So if you guys have an interest, you guys can check it out. It's probably at the library. You can probably read parts of it online as well. Standardization of money becomes important. What do we mean by that? So when some seller, or rather a buyer, is trying to buy, say, goats or fish or whatever it is, they might bring a shiny object over, okay? And they might say, oh, look, this is gold. It's beautiful, isn't it? So why don't we use gold as money, in the sense that I'm going to give you gold from now on whenever I want to buy things, okay? So everybody will look at their faces like, what are you talking about? You have nothing useful to give me, like clothing or apples or something I actually want. What is this gold? So then society has to come up with a method of standardizing the money, right? We have to make sure everybody is willing to accept it, that they find this gold to be something of value, and that other people are willing to take the gold from them. So example, I'm a seller. Somebody came and paid with, in gold. Now I have all this gold in my house, but I need to get rid of it because I can't eat it and I can't wear it, in the sense that, it's not like useful to me in that way. So I'm going to go and give it to someone, and hopefully they will give me something useful in exchange, right? So the standardization of money is important. First, is it acceptable by everybody? All right, so acceptable has to be a criteria. Now, it also has to be a method of accounting value. So I get a chunk of gold, then I go to somebody and they say, well, what is this worth? Am I supposed to give you 10 bags of sugar for this nugget of gold, or am I supposed to give you 20 bags? And you're looking at them with a blank face because you don't know either, right? So someone in society has to make things standardized so that they say, okay, so this coin, let's make things that actually look standardized. So let's give a shape to it. that everyone can recognize and say, oh, this is a dollar coin, or this is a $2 coin, or a $5 coin, right? So somebody has to put the stamp on and say $1, $2, $3. Maybe there's a business that does it, right? You go to the gold dealer who basically acts as the guy who does this, production thing. Okay, so first question was, is the money acceptable by all? Whether people will actually take gold from you, right? The other question was, is it a means of accounting value? So now you have to standardize the money so that people know, okay, this is a $5 gold coin. This is going to get me 5 goats. Now, if I produce a $2, I will only get 2 goats, right? So this is what's going on. Now you end up with paper money, coins, all kinds of things. We no longer use gold, right? We're now using other kinds of metals. So paper money is also known as fiat money, and we'll talk about that in another class. Money regulation. So as I mentioned, in the market system, maybe there's a gold dealer who's doing these things, right? But in today's states, you see that there's actually government intervention, right? This government no longer just provides security to the population, but it also regulates markets. It's getting involved in regulation of money, for example. Somebody has to standardize the money. Somebody has to regulate money supply. So usually in the US, we say the Treasury, the Mint, the central banks, these are the organizations that have authority in the country to print money and to produce the metal coins, okay? Nobody else has that authority. Only the government can do this, okay? So we say the US Treasury is handling how much money should be in circulation, and they work with the central banks, right, to do this. The central bank basically decides how much money should be in circulation or the money supply, okay? So they set the interest rates for banks. There's a minimum interest rate that the bank must offer you if you put your money in the bank. If the central bank raises the interest rate, that means the banks have to pay you more. All right, and when they do that, what happens? A lot of people want to save money because they're getting more interest. If they do that, they put their money away from their pockets and into banks, right? Banks are required to, invest that money, but they have to pay a higher rate of interest on that investment as well. Money regulation. So the banks are also making sure that the money is standardized. We talked about it earlier. The gold shop guy was doing that before. Now the government does all of that work, okay? It creates a standard form of accounting as well, so we know the difference between a dollar coin and a $2 coin. But the government also tracks money to prevent use of counterfeit money, right? Because it wants to be the sole authority that prints money and produces coins, so that there is a standardized form of money, that is, there's uniformity in money, right? Not only looks wise, but also value wise. So we don't want counterfeit money. What do counterfeit people do? So they print their own stuff. It's just based on paper. It might be crumpled up to look like old version of money. And then basically they give it to you hoping that you'll accept it, and they'll trick you by using this, right? So counterfeit money people, they're very running an illegal business, right? So the government has to track money. So they put all kinds of some kind of tracking system within the paper that we use, right? So they can tell. Sometimes the paper quality is important. Other times they place some strips in there that has to be there, magnetic strips or something. So all that's going on. So let's stop here, okay? And we'll come back to